All right, so warm welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Olli Walsdorf. I'm a technical marketing engineer working for Cisco for the software-defined storage division. And I want to talk a little bit about how you can make Ceph in the backend for object storage a little bit more enterprise than it already is. So first of all, I think most of you know probably Cisco, but those people who don't know how Cisco works with the compute part and the network part, I just want to explain a little bit about what Cisco is. So on the one hand, Cisco is since 2009 in the area of the compute nodes, which means we're producing and developing blades and rack servers. So one of the things is, of course, the rack server part, which is pretty popular and getting more popular when we're coming to software-defined storage. But another part is definitely also the blade chassis for more having compute power in it. But I think this is nothing spectacular. You see that from many vendors. But I think the most important part, which comes with UCS and Cisco, is the part of the fabric interconnect. So what we're doing is always, we have a kind of intelligence into our architecture. We put a kind of intelligence in our architecture, which enables you to centrally manage the whole environment. And not only managing, it's also about deploying your whole hardware. So that is pretty easy in terms of you just create something like a profile and push that out to a server. And I'm going to that profile into my next slide. So this architecture helps you scaling, especially in software-defined storage environments where you scale out your storage and your servers a lot by simplifying the scaling part in it. And that scaling and that management can be done via various things like the GUI. You can push it out via API or CLI. So there's a lot of possibilities right now to work with that UCS part in the UCS manager. So how does it exactly work? How does it help you in a software-defined storage environment having Ceph in the backend? So what is said, one of the parts is that we create a profile, and that profile we can push out to many servers. So I'll give you an example. When you start normally configuring servers in the backend for Ceph or for other storage, software-defined storage, you go to every server, touch manually and configure compute, storage, networking, everything. So what we're doing at Cisco with the UCS manager part and the fabric interconnect is we're creating a profile, which is basically an XML API file. And in that file, everything is defined in terms of, I want to have a 40 gig network for public network. I want to have a 40 gig network card for a cluster network. I want to have a 10 gig for admin. I want to have 24 disks to that server, 24 disks to the other server, and a couple of SSDs. So we create that service profile and push that out to the server, and not only to one server, we can push it out to multiple servers at the same time. So that means the server gets immediately configured with all the hardware specifics you need for the software-defined environment. And that makes it very easy to scale your whole environment. So think about you start with 10 servers, and you scale out to 20, 30, 40 servers in your OpenStack environment. You just push out once that profile to the servers, and they immediately get configured in the right way you need them. So this is pretty easy. So what we're doing now is, when we think about Ceph, most of the time in the scale-out environments, we're handling big capacities, large capacities, and with that, of course, it makes sense to work with a storage dense server. So one of our servers here using for Ceph and for scale-out environments is the C3260, which is a storage dense server. So that server gives you a couple of choices here in terms of you can put in there 1 or 2 nodes, you can put in there multiple disks, different disks in there. And one of the most important parts, what you never should forget, is the network. So we put in there 4 times 40 gig network just to make sure we have enough bandwidth for such a high amount of capacity and a high amount of drives. So the 3260 is one essential part for scaling out in a Ceph environment for us. So when we now talk about that software-defined storage, when we talk about Ceph, we at Cisco thought about it would be good to give you a kind of reference architecture which helps you in scaling and building up your environment. So what we developed is a kind of reference architecture, which is here. What you can see is it's based on a couple of storage dense servers, 3260s, and a couple of smaller servers, which gives you, for instance, for a software-defined environment, monitor nodes, admin nodes, so different varieties, different possibilities here, but all connected to the Fabric interconnects, which are able to manage that whole environment and to push out the profiles to whatever you need here. So that environment is easily scalable from 300 terabytes up to 15 petabytes. And everything is what I said, it's managed through the Fabric interconnects, easy to scale, policy-based, the whole model. So you start small and you can easily grow your whole environment here. And as an example, when we look now at a Ceph managed environment, now there are a couple of possibilities here when we look at the storage dense server. So what you see here is, starting from the left, there's a chassis. That chassis has 2 nodes in it. That's a 3260 with 2 nodes. And that node contains, he has different kind of disks in it. So he has a couple of SSDs in it for journal writes, for instance. He has the capacity disks in it for hosting the whole objects in your Ceph environment. And now you can see that for multiple nodes here. So this is up to 6 chassis for the reference architecture, 12 nodes, and they're looking all the same. So what we can do now is, on the one hand, we have different pools defined for our Ceph object storage. So we can say, hey, let's have it Ceph managed. We have a pool for throughput-intensive workloads, which has a couple of SSDs, which has a couple of capacity drives, so the right balance for whatever you need. And this can be easily configured, the whole structure, with UCS Manager together with Ceph. And the other pool is then for capacity, for instance, which means I'm only using the parts of the HDDs for capacity. So just build up a pool for Ceph environment, which hosts all the large capacities. Now, the next step could be also, hey, I want to have it chassis managed. So which means I have 2 nodes in that 3260 server, and one of the nodes hosting all the SSDs for probably having an IOPS optimized environment for Ceph, and the other capacity drives are responsible or are hosted by the other node, and this node is then having just all the capacity. So again, having split the whole configuration, hosting different pools, having different configurations of your environment, and this is very easy to implement with the UCS Manager and the 3260. And of course, in the next step, we're talking about implementing NVMe, which helps you then, of course, getting more capacity in your whole Ceph environment. So which means you have the NVMe straight in the nodes implemented, and having all top-loaded drives are capacity-based HDDs. So the overall configuration gives you a lot of capacity, but also with the NVMe drive, a lot of performance for journal writes, for instance. So this is another option. So what you can see is you have multiple use cases and multiple configuration possibilities for that 3260 server and the UCS managed environment here. So to get everything summarized, I think 3 things you should take away from that short vBrownbag session. So first of all, Cisco can do a couple of things here in terms of we're doing compute, we're doing network, and we're doing storage, and everything comes from the UCS infrastructure. So the compute power comes from servers, some from C-Rex servers or from blades, for instance. The network is coming from the Fabric interconnect and going northbound from Nexus switches, for instance. And the storage is coming from the local storage of the servers, for instance. So that's one thing. Then, of course, with the UCS Manager and the Fabric interconnects, we are able to simplify the whole environment, and we can easily scale the whole environment just by connecting more servers to the Fabric interconnect, pushing out the profile, and the server gets immediately configured in the right way I need it for my Ceph environment here. And last but not least, when we talk about the storage dense server, the 3260, there are many possibilities to configure the server in different ways. So you could say I have a single node and use all the capacity I can get for HDDs and getting up to 600 terabyte per node. But I can also split that chassis into 2 nodes and configure them separately in different ways. But everything will be managed by the UCS manager. So various possibilities. And yeah, finally, I think it's a great change, a different approach we do from Cisco when it comes to Ceph and object storage. So if there are any questions, I'm still here right after the session, and you can expect, of course, more documentation from us in terms of Ceph, software-defined storage, and Cisco-managed environments. So thank you very much for the short session, and enjoy the afternoon.